I'm Ben Meyer.
And I'm Rob Wright.
And this week we want to talk about an issue that's been affecting the gaming community a lot lately, especially those in the media. There's been a lot of people who have been calling the game review process into question. What with GameSpot and some more recent revelations with the lawsuit that Rob will talk about later. And really, what we want to talk about today is the game review system broken? What are some things we can do better, both on Tom's Games and just as an industry in general, to help people make informed decisions and just increase the credibility of what we're doing? Because we think that we're doing a good job and trying to do our best.
But we know we're not perfect.
Nobody's perfect. But there are definitely some things that have called the industry into question, so we want to get into that.
Yes.
And the first issue we want to talk about, Rob, is should we have scores? Because that seems to be the lightning rod. You did a couple reviews this past week, couple weeks. Assassin's Creed was one that you personally gave a rather low score, and then before that, another one of our reviewers, Ryan, gave Kane and Lynch rather a higher score than the kind of industry average, which also brought a lot of criticism on the forums. So what do you say to the point of scores? Is it a valuable tool?
I do think it's valuable. I can understand because when we started doing game reviews, we did not want to get into scoring. We were trying to come up with an alternative way to offer, a valuable sort of critical analysis of a game, rather than getting into sort of the nitpicking that comes with reviews. Eventually we decided to ditch that because it didn't seem like it was providing a lot of value to the readers. I do think, as much as I gripe about people skipping to the end of a review and reading the score and obsessing over a number rather than reading what's really in the heart of the review, reading the reviewer's experience, as much as I hate that, I do think it offers some value because at the end of the day, these guys are, you're spending $60 plus, to invest in a game, and you want to know whether or not if it's a sound investment or not. And I can understand that. So I do think you need to have some type of scale, whether it's a grade, a 5-star, or a 1 to 10 scale, that indicates where you think the game resides, and good, bad, ugly.
Well, let's talk about how you come up with this score.
Yeah.
One of the biggest criticisms of your Assassin's Creed score on the forums was by a guy who thought your score was incorrect because when he looked at your review as a whole, he looked at how you talked about each component of the game, gameplay, visuals, etc., and he thought that on the majority of those subjects, you actually talked rather favorably about the game, and then at the end you gave it a 5.5, and he was kind of dumbfounded, and he came up with his own kind of numbering system and said, hey, you should have given it a 7 or an 8.
Yeah.
And my point to that is that maybe you didn't weight them all the same. What do you say to kind of the breakdown? I know GameSpot does it kind of that way.
Yeah, I mean, GameSpot has an interesting formula where and the other sites use this as well, where they kind of rank each component of a traditional game, graphics, audio, gameplay, story, other elements, and they assign a numerical value to each aspect, and then they kind of come up with an average, and then that's your overall score. I don't have any problem with that. I mean, I don't want to criticize the way other sites do it. I mean, to me, I just think that if you get to a point where you're dissecting a game like that, I think the danger is that you're going to start to weight each story in each, graphic element of every game the same way. And I don't think that that's the right way to do it. A classic example of this would be Half-Life 2. To me, Half-Life 2 is worthy of a 10. But I don't think it would get a 10 if you were grading it like that, because the story, the story is rather unremarkable. I mean, it's pretty much a point A to point B, science fiction pulp, pretty thin story. But that doesn't change the fact that it's a great game, because it's saying that game needed a better story is like saying the Beatles needed a better drummer. I mean, you don't notice that the story is not maybe as great as some other games. It's a great game.
Well, let's talk about this then. How can we use that score if there are different people giving scores on the site that don't seem to jive with each other so much.
Well,
You have Travis giving reviews, you're giving reviews, other freelancers are giving reviews, and then you end up, how can you relatively grade a 10 from Rob versus a 6 from Travis, for instance?
We have, we've talked about that since we started doing reviews, and we tried to come up with a sort of a guideline for how we're going to go about grading or scoring games. And, basically, we try to stick to the 1 to 10 scale, like literally, a 5 is average. A 6 or a 7 is not average. 6 or a 7 is still pretty good. I mean, 6 is worth playing. It may not be worth purchasing. A 7 is good. It's, an okay purchase. It's not, a slam dunk. An 8 is very, very good. A 9 is a slam dunk, and a 10 is a classic. I mean, and then you start getting down to the lower end of the scale. A 1 is unplayable. It's trash. I think the thing that we try to do is we all try to follow the same guidelines, but it's important to remember that each review is that author's opinion. It's that individual's opinion, and it's based on their experience with the game. And people's experiences with the game are going to differ wildly. And I just think that it's important to remember that. Like, we can't all, unfortunately, sit around at a round table and review the same game at Tom's Games and Tom's Hardware and come up with an aggregate, like a collective score based on 3, 4, 5, 6 different opinions.
And I think at the end of the day, that would dilute what that author is trying to say about the game in general, because they've taken the time to write this review for users to get a more nuanced impression of the game. And if you're averaging scores and you're not getting that. But that brings me to the more widespread problem of grade inflation.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't even consider this a maybe. There are definitely different sites that are using scales where you never see a score below a 7, really.
Yeah.
A 10 is a playable game. Anything below a 7 is horrible. And so that average is bumped up. So when you compare a score that isn't doing as much grade inflating or isn't it at all, then it seems way out of whack, and you don't know who to trust if you're looking at kind of these Metacritic scores.
Sure.
So how do you address that issue?
I mean, that's tough, because I think that everybody needs to keep in mind that a 1 to 10 scale is not going to mean the same thing at every site. That's the first thing. Second, you're going to go to Metacritic or Games Rankings and look up the aggregate score, the average score for a particular game. And if there's some scores out there that deviate wildly from that norm, then you're going to automatically discount them because, I don't know, I mean, just sort of out of habit.
Right.
And I think there's a danger in that. I just think that we're at a point now where we're kind of stuck in this phase where we're obsessing over the score, and you're at a point now where I don't think reviewers for games are kind of afforded the same level of interpretation. They're not allowed to treat reviewing a game as reviewing art the way you would with a book or a movie. People are going to connect with things differently. They're going to experience things differently, and I think that we're treating games like they're just a piece of software and they're going to be played and viewed the same way. And I just don't think that's true.
Yeah. And there's, until we can get to a point where you see it as art, as more than the sum of its parts, I think you'll always have those kind of issues. That's all the time we have for this week. I'm Ben Meyer.
And I'm Rob Wright.
And we'll see you again next time.